seemingly had a role. What was Leonard Briggs' role?
Well, basically, he could stir up trouble. He's an electrician. He did a lot of the electrical work, and he did the inspection on the cars. He didn't always do that. Ross Culver was, but Leonard was kind of his boss, he'd oversee the cars, and that's basic what his deal was, Leonard's.
What was Marv Thorpe's role?
Marv was a flagman. Basically, he got out the first year, and the reason why he got out is he couldn't spend much time. I think it's about that time he got in that business down there in the garage, and he couldn't spend much time at the racetrack. So basically, his job was flagging, and so we bought him out after the first year.
Then it was down to the four of you then.
Yeah, there was four, yeah.
And what was Don's role?
Well, I think his role was basically helping me. Don got to the point where he knew exactly what my right hand was doing. Yeah. Because if I needed to set a disc, or if I needed a load of water when I was grading or anything, he knew what my next step was. Yeah. And like Chubb said, he took care of the grass cutting and the toilets and stuff like that. That's basically, and there's a million things to do at the racetrack. Make sure that the pops in the coolers and all kinds of different things like that. I mean, we all did that stuff, but he was basically, that's what he did.
Lloyd Williams.
Lloyd took care of the publicity, getting the stuff in the newspapers and stuff like that. He'd go out and put out flyers and stuff like that on ball tires on his Hudson.
You all had other jobs at that time.
Let me just ask you a little bit more about the publicity. I'm sorry. We heard the name Gordon Mann, Emery Mann's brother.
Yeah.
Was he hired by the track to be the photographer, or did he do that on his own?
He did that on his own. He sold a lot of pictures. I'm pretty certain. I mean, we might have had to buy some pictures from him at times for our programs and stuff. Right. But as far as being on the payroll, I had the payroll book over. I just threw it in the garbage yesterday. Not that I couldn't get it out. It's still there.
Let's save it. That would be terrific. For our purposes, that would be terrific. But Gordon, so to your knowledge, Gordon was a kind of independent contractor that sort of took his own pictures, and then he would sell them to the drivers. Everybody else. The program itself, we were lucky enough when we had a chance to chat with Marv down in Seneca, and he came out with a whole mountain of the original programs. Is that stuff that you would do, or did you prepare them? Did you do the publication? Was that Lloyd's thing?
We had different people doing it. I think Lloyd definitely did some of that, but we had different people. We had a guy, Dick Stewart was his name, from, he was up at Oswego. And he sold veterinarian supplies, if I remember. But he did this on the side, and then he came down and did our program when it got bigger, or not that littler one that you're probably seeing.
Yeah.
But we had a kid that went to work for Champion Spark Plugs. I don't know if he's still with them or not, but he went with to work for, and he used to be our Denny Bender. I don't know if you've probably heard that name somewhere along. But he did some work on our programs. Agnes Baker always had she passed away here 4 or 5 months ago. She always had a story in there. She was a big race fan.
Where was she from, Agnes?
Bear Lake here. She lived right here in Lottsville.
Is the family still around? The Baker family?
She didn't have no children, and her husband died years ago. Yeah. So, and I don't even know if there's hardly any family around anymore.
Yeah. Just curious, because That's the kind of stuff that might be lying around in all her old.
Oh, she's got some stuff.
Yeah. So.
And I don't know if Donnie Martin might be able to tell you about. Donnie Martin lives at the end of this road down here, just before you get to Boom. You know where Boom lives? Well, coming this way, it's on the right-hand side of the road. Donnie Martin's an accountant, and he had all her stuff put it on auction. But this Denny Bender, I heard called from, I don't know if it was in Michigan or where, and he was interested in some of that. And Jim Scott, he sold a lot of that stuff when he had his auction. They were selling it for, I think it was, I don't know how big the boxes were, but he got $35 a box for it at the auction. I did hear that.
We were able to get, you guys became incorporated. Lloyd bought the property, and in 1956, you created a corporation called Stateline Speedways Inc.
Yeah.
And in 1958, you Lloyd transferred it into the corporation. So you were a corporation that owned the Speedway. And was it then just the four you guys were the stockholders? Yeah. Were you equal stockholders? Were you equal partners in that?
Yeah.
And just fast forward, you owned it until you sold it to
Siemens.
Siemens, okay.
There's a story there too.
Sure. Perfect.
Well, we was trying to sell Erie,
right,
and we couldn't get together with Franny on price. And me with my big mouth, I said, well, why don't you buy Stateline? And so he ended up buying Stateline. We came over and went over things, and he ended up buying Stateline, and we sold Erie to, can't even think of his name now, he's in Florida.
Charlie Bonnet.
Charlie Bonnet is right. And we had a horrible time there. He couldn't make payments, and we sold it to him on we actually sold Franny on the same kind of deal. And of course, I got a lot of things I could say about Franny that is negative, but that's one thing. Franny's word, and I don't know if it got a little away from him, but at the time, I mean, what Franny told us, that's the way it was. And
can I ask how much you sold it for?
How many years have we sold that? A long time ago. I think the selling price was like $120,000.
Yeah. Back to the beginning. Let's throw out some names of some of the driver personalities. And if there's a story or a vignette that you might have, and you're wearing bright orange, and we had a chance to catch up with number 511, Squirt Johns. What does Squirt Johns mean to you?
A lot. Squirt was a big fan. He drew a lot of people. Lou drew a lot of people.
Why was that?
Huh?
Why was that?
He was a winner for one thing.
Yeah.
That helped. He lived a long, 90 miles away from Stateline Speedway and come there and race every Saturday night. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, today, 90 miles is nothing, but back then, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
And Squirt was good with the fans, with the kids, he talking to them when he had time for them and stuff like that. I don't know. I always liked Squirt but I don't know. Maybe I like Squirt because I knew he was a good draw for us. I don't know.
Yeah.
But because he definitely was. I know that I talked to him a lot of times on the phone, after he got hurt there, and I was quite interested in getting back to racing. And like I say, it probably had more to do with the fan base he had. That's what I think, but maybe I shouldn't have been looking at it that way, but I always got along good with Squirt.
Dean Layfield.
Dean, hell of a showman, I'll tell you that.
Was he?
I personally, not that much. I was quite young at that time when Dean was racing for us, so I didn't have that same contact as I did with Squirt.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what year, how many years Dean was there, but it wasn't too many.
2 or 3.
But
he was one of your most successful racers at the beginning, wasn't he?
Dean,
yeah.
he was pretty good. He was good, and he had fans too. And he was long. I think he was farther away than Squirt was. Wellsville. I want to say it's over 100 miles to Wellsville.
Yeah.
But he was good. I don't remember. I want to tell you how many cars we had the first night, and probably you've got already researched that. I don't know. I can't remember. I would say maybe 15, 16.
Mm-hmm.
14 was the number I got.
Yeah, well, that could be.
Bobby Schnars.
Bobby, hell of a driver. And when you start talking about, you was talking about with Squirt about Chubb running the inside the track, there wasn't anybody running the inside anymore than Bobby did. So I don't know who Chubb was trying to help. I think Bobby probably drew a lot of fans because he's a winner, but it's just, I don't know, it just seemed like we were at odds, not all of us maybe, but it was, we were at odds somehow, and I introduced his car owner to my niece by marriage, Janie Russell there. So I introduced him to Frosty, and they ended up getting married. But I know, I can retell you a story. One time, it was about noon on a Saturday, and me and my brother was going to Jamestown. I don't know if we was going up there to eat or what we was doing, but we met Bobby and Frosty and I don't know, probably some of the other Snars boys. Met them right there going into Bust-I, and I don't know, one of them says, "Wave, wave, wave" to Bob. We must have been feuding at the time or something. And he waving, it was Don and me. We always got a big kick out. Told that story a lot of times. But no, Bobby he was a hell of a driver. I mean, he could get a car around a race. And they back then there was nowhere near the technology there is today. I mean, the technology was in your head. It wasn't. I mean, they did things that killed one spark plug so they was only running on 7 so they get traction and all kinds of stuff like that,
Really?
I mean, they were good at that.
Yeah.
And so he was definitely, he was one of, I won't say he was the biggest fan drawer, but he was right up the top because he was good. There wasn't any better.
We asked the question of Chubb. Randy asked the question to Chubb about the guy you're least likely to race against. We had one lap to go, and it was a one-on-one. Who didn't you want to race against? And we've talked to Jim Scott and Ronnie Blackmer and Squirt Johns, and everybody has the same answer. Everybody has the same answer, and it's this guy from Erie, Pennsylvania, and who would race. And what was the number?
Tommy Dill?
Tommy Dill. Everybody said as far as just aggressive, maybe dirty, but nevertheless, they knew that guy had to push you out of the way, Tom Dill wouldn't hesitate one iota. Was that your sense of Tom Dill?
Say that?
Was that your sense of Tom Dill, that he was a real aggressive driver?
He definitely was aggressive, yeah. He definitely was aggressive. I don't know if he was a dirty driver. I don't know if I'd call Tom dirty.
That's my term. I don't want to say, but he was so aggressive that he would knock his mother over, that type of thing.
He might do that. Tom, I seen him a couple years ago. Yeah, I quit when Chubb. I knew right away who I was thinking about when you asked Chubb that question, but he don't even think that way. But the guy from Union City, I can't think he was an insurance agent, not an agent, but goes out and writes up estimates.
Bob Craig?
Do you know him?
Bob Craig?
Bob Craig.
That's who you're talking about?
Huh?
You're talking about Bob Craig?
That's who I think is. That's who I thought when he was talking about Chubb. I don't personally. I don't. But I'll never forget him running Chubb into the wall coming off the second turn. Just turned right and Chubb was going by. I remember that. But like today, these guys. What they call these guys that drive like that? They call them missiles.
Missiles.
Yeah. They got one in the World Outlaws. This guy. You know all the World Outlaws guys? That Brandon, he's running for Rookie of the Year from down in Carpenterville, where's that, Kentucky or?
Brandon Kinzer?
No, I think he's a second generation driver. He's running second in outlaw points, I can tell you that. But
I don't know who it is.
He is a missile. And I don't think he's a dirty driver.
Yeah.
I don't think, it's, and then when these local drivers run against the Outlaws or against the Renegades or any of these traveling shows, it's unbelievable how much better drivers they are.
Yeah.
You go to Stateline and it can be I haven't been there for a couple of years, but it can be a crash fest.
Yeah.
And you go, when the Outlaws are there or wherever they're at, they drive altogether different. They don't drive that way. It just seems like it's. I'm so happy that Chubb is on the road because I can remember backing into the garage when he was at home. What the heck happened tonight? Something would be tore up, or I always get worried about engines and stuff, but now when he's on the road, I don't think nowhere near like that, because them guys are more professional, and when they're more professional, the local guys get more professional. And I say there's three groups. There's the Outlaws, which this year they had 15, 16 cars that run every night. Then I say the locals, and then they've got the regional drivers that go to the big shows that are, close, 150 miles. They may go a couple hundred miles. So they have lots of competition. And that's one sport. Racing's one sport that you couldn't say, okay, Cleveland Cavaliers, come on in, Jamestown, we got a team that wants to play. That's the only sport that you can compete. You couldn't compete with the Yankees, or you couldn't compete with a basketball team. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
You can compete. You might not have the equipment, as much equipment as them guys got, but you got the same equipment.
Right.
Unless you blowed up the night before, or, you know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Since you were on the track itself, Jerry, during the races, you're in the pits, you're kind of controlling things. Was there a lot of pushing and shoving and activity between races? Did you get much of that?
More so back then than you do today, I think.
Do you remember some of the guys that are maybe a little more hot-headed than others? We have a name in mind, but I just want to see if it's the same one you had.
Oh, I don't know. The Gilbert boys up in Westfield. They were always pretty aggressive.
Right.
They could get you in trouble.
What about Bud Finale?
Oh, God. Boy, I'm having a senior moment right now. Who's the one that lives in Jamestown?
Floyd.
Floyd.
Yeah.
There's a Floyd. Floyd and I get along good, but he had a temper.
Really?
I think more so than Bud, but that's my own. Now they had a brother. The third one was
Vern.
He was altogether different, I figured, than the other two. But Floyd could really get carried away.
Yeah.
Oh, we used to have some. I don't think there's anywhere near the problems in the pit as we used to have. I don't know, can't tell you why, but I mean, guys would go the wrong way of the track and run somebody in the wall. Squirt can tell you about that. Johnny McGinley one night went around the opposite way and run Squirt in the wall right in front of the flag, man.
Wow.
Oh yeah, there was. I don't think it's nowhere near as bad. I've seen my son get mad 2 or 3 times and not. I guess he was a little upset this weekend down at the Dirt 100, but Boom told me that, of course we're off the record here, so I mean, you cut all that stuff out anyway. But anyway, Boom was telling me that the trouble when you go to like the Dirt 100, when you're racing an association, they pay attention. They have the World Outlaws has a director, race director, and if you jump the gun, you go back a row. And they were letting them jump the gun on the outside down there at Dirt 100, and Chubb was starting the third spot, and the guy was on the inside. He's supposed to start the race in the front row. Well, the guy on the outside, which is only won 101 World Outlaw races, Steve Francis, he's on the outside. Well, he starts the race, and they let him do it. And Chubb says, well, it wasn't just him. It was just about all 6 heat races that then they let it go. And they just freight trained Chubb in that deal.
Yeah. If I were to say to you, Jerry, the most amazing thing I ever saw at Stateline Speedway, it would be this. What would you say? It could be the funniest thing, it could be the most bizarre thing, it's just something that when you get together with the old guys and you sit in a corner and you say, do you remember the time?
You can cut one of these out, but I want to tell you 2 of them.
Sure.
They cut it out because it has something to do with Chubb and I. But the most amazing thing I had is the 18 car pile up, I think in 58 or somewhere along it. Yeah. Coming off the second turn. 18 cars piled up.
Wow.
And that was the most amazing thing.
What caused that? Do you remember that?
Oh, I can't remember now. Somebody got crossed up front and they just kept piling and piling in. The other one I was going to tell about, I'm certain you've been around long enough to know Bill Catania. Gentleman he is. And every time Bill Catania sees me, I don't care where it's at. It's a racetrack, and he still goes to the racetrack. His kid did have something to do with Lake Erie Speedway. But he always brings it up about the time Chubb beat him up at, it was kind of amazing. Bill didn't win a lot of races, but he was a gentleman and a good racer driver. He raced for us for years, but in limited late or cadets, whatever you want to call them. But on the last lap of the race, and I can't tell you who was running second, but Bill was running first. And must be Chubb could just see him slowing down to protect the lead. He was on the inside, and this other guy was on the inside in second place. And on the last lap, Chubb just went to the outside and blew into 3 and 4 and came off 4 and beat him. And I always remember that and think about that. And Bill always does, because every time he sees me, he mentions it. He says he never even let me win the. Oh, he won some heat race or some features, but he says Joe wouldn't let me win there. That was one that it's hard to. We had a lot of. I'll tell you, we had a lot of good races back in them days. A lot of good races, because the cars, the cars today are so close. I don't know if this is true or not, but I think you got to be 3/10 faster. If you started this car here, this car here, and this car is going to have to be 3/10 faster than the car up here to get by him. I don't know if that's the right figure, but it's close. Well, it's hard, and there's too many guys out there. They're not spending enough time on the racetracks to get a good racing surface, and I think that's bad. You got to have a good surface. In fact, that has a lot to do with your length of your shows. If the track is right, you won't get all them caution flags. And I don't know. Franny don't want to spend no time on it. I know that. He just wants to put a whole bunch of water on it and maybe not get started until 9:30. And I think that's hurt racing too. I don't know if you guys went up there and how much often you go up there, but I know that you can't. I see some tracks, I'll tell you, they got everything planned out. 7 o'clock they're going to start. They start at 7 o'clock. And we're going to have such and such a class on the track at 7:30, and they'll have that class on the track at 7:30. I mean, I think all that stuff up here is, and I know that this is a good racing area. I mean, I know that like Chubb was saying, there's a lot of other things to do, but there's 2 things you got to do. Is you got to cut the length of your show, and you got to give the drivers a good racing surface.
Describe the time when you sat down with the surviving shareholders and decided you wanted to sell the track. You were in the race business, race ownership business at Stateline for 29 years, and at some point you must have said, let's see if we can sell this place. What caused you to get to that point?
Well, Lloyd, he died of cancer, it was early 80s. And it took a long time to negotiate. I want to say we run the racetrack a couple years with his wife, actually. And finally I got her talked into selling it, because it was costing her. I mean, we was putting all the time in, and there was no, dividends. Right. I mean, it was all going out in labor, and finally she sold it, and I don't remember what year it was now, but it was only a year or so later that we sold it. That racing was kind of down, and I say racing runs in 5-year cycles. It's real good for 5 years, and then it's just so-so for 5 years. Then it's good for 5 years, and that's how I looked at the whole 28 years I was in it. But we didn't really sit down. I can remember we had Leonard's mother was our bookkeeper, and she's 90-some years old when she passed away. She worked on the books right up until. But anyway, I can't remember what year she died in now, but anyway, we'd have like an influx of money in a checkbook. And I got so that and late in the year, I'd take the kind of, went in, we had an office in Sugar Grove, and I'd go down there and write checks. And the reason why I did that, because somebody gets some bright idea that they were going to spend some money. Well, we had $30,000 to go to the state of New York, or, you know, point money that had to be paid $10,000 or so. And somebody see, hey, the checkbook's got $60,000 in it, or $70,000, or whatever it might have. But it was all spent. And so I took it on myself to start paying bills ahead of time, rather than wait until, you know, they came due. And I think I was getting tired of. That's a lot of work. Yep. Going back and forth to Erie and grading that racetrack and doing this one up here, and it just got 28 years is a long time. I mean, I think that's basically what we'd talked about selling a couple, 3 times, but just like we used to ask before about the selling price. Well, Franny always said, well, you cut the damn timber off of the land. Well, we did cut it off, but he knew it was gone before. It wasn't like we sold it to him and then and stuff like that. But
and at the time, Lloyd had died, so it was you and Don
and Leonard was running.
Okay. Regrets as you look back over that 28, 29-year period, things you would have done differently?
I don't know. I made a living off of it from 1960. Well, 60. I made a living before that. I didn't make a living before that, but from 67 to he sold it in 84. I made just a decent living. I had some jobs in the wintertime and stuff. In the last, I don't know how many years I sold cars. I want to say the last 4 or 5 years that I was in, I sold cars. So, I don't know. No, I wouldn't do anything much different. I'll tell you, I'm, like I said before, pretty proud of Chubb, what he's done. It's the only driver that's ever left the area and made a living at it, and he's struggling.
You'll be the only one too.
Huh? Yeah, he will be, and he's struggling right now, I'm certain. But you'd never know he's struggling. I mean, he told me when he bought that hauler that was his last year, and he's never had high dollar sponsors. Only basically Lester Building was pretty good for 4 years, and he's going to get his last check from them. Because this is getting into business that probably, I ain't worried about what you're going to put on anyway. But he said, I'm going to buy that, I'm going to do that hauler. Because this is the last, because he pretty much figures you have to have somebody that's real close to you, that you just don't go out and find them sponsors. And he's running against a lot of young kids that've got high dollar grandfathers, or he always kind of digs me once in a while, and just kidding like that I didn't ever have enough money. But so he put that together. But he put that thing together, and that's a brand new one. That's 4 or 5 years old. The chassis. He didn't go out and buy a new, or the truck itself. He put brand new. Everything else is brand new. But he saved probably $50,000 to $75,000 doing it that way. Like one guy told me one time, getting off the subject, but one guy told me, I was introduced to him here like a couple of years